Well, I'm a huge fan of gratitude, and I teach my children all the time to focus on what they have got, not what they haven't got. And I think one of the most pernicious and addictive traits in the world today is people always thinking happiness is over there. It's never over there, it's always here.
Welcome to the Build to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every single day with the mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you compound and scale your wealth in life so you can give more or all of it away. I'm your host today, Brett Swartz. In each every episode, we feature some of the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires. They share their principles, values, secrets, and wisdom, providing each of us with the insight we need to reach the next level of success, faith, and impact. Hey, I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of the UK, and he collectively has been viewed over 150 million times just on his TED Talk alone. He teaches how to speak so that people want to listen, which is one of the 6 most viewed TED Talks ever written. As well, he delivers engaging, entertaining, and transformational content, and equally potent and effective with live or virtual delivery. And he's here to talk to us how to communicate beyond AI, how to truly talk and connect with one another. Please welcome to the show with me, Julian Treasure. Julian, how are you doing?
Thank you. It's lovely to be here, Brett. Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you.
Excellent. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us just a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Sure, yes, studied economics at university and played music. And actually, it was the other way around more. And then I worked in advertising, and I tried being a musician for a couple of years, made records, got very broke, as many people do, and eventually ended up working in magazine publishing, which I found, a lot of fun. Sales, primarily. So I worked my way up to become an ad manager and then marketing director of a publishing company. And then I left that in 1988, took the leap and started my own business, which I grew over a period of 15 years to become one of the UK's leading contract publishers. You call it custom publishing in America, I think, producing beautiful magazines for brands. So a form of branded content, it's called now. And I sold that company in 2002 and then launched a company which was rather nearer to my heart, actually, because, I've been listening to the world ever since I was little. Musicians do, I think, listen in a slightly more acute way than non-musicians. You have to, really. If you're playing in a band or an orchestra, you have to listen to all the other players at the same time, very attentively. So you develop this multi-track, attentive listening. And in working with brands, it had often struck me that they make a lot of noise. They don't think about sound at all. And so I started a company called the Sound Agency, which asked and answered the question, how does your brand sound? And worked on sonic logos, soundscapes in spaces, and all sorts of sound for different brands. I did that for about 20 years. I closed that last year, actually, to focus on what I'm really passionate about now, which is inspiring the world to listen. We really need a different relationship with sound and with each other based on listening. Politicians go off and have talks. I wish they'd go off and have listens instead. So I think listening is the secret sauce. It's forgotten. It's not taught in schools. And it's what we really need to focus on, particularly as you started at the top of the show talking about AI coming in. Never has human relationship been more important than it is now.
We're speaking of Julian Treasure. You can go to juliantreasure.com, and as well, you can check out his book, How to Be Heard. He also has a new book that's going to be coming out. We'll talk about the end of this show, but that's not going to be released until next year. But juliantreasure.com. So it sounds like your unique gift is being able to multi-track, attentive listen, not only for yourself, but also helping brands and businesses do the same. Is that a fair summary on some of what you're going to be able to offer us today Julian, anything else to add? Maybe your unique gift or strength that you feel like you have that can bless others today.
Yeah, the two sides of the coin are speaking and listening. And it's this form of primal communication. We've been doing it for 200,000 years, probably, with complex language, which has been largely displaced in the last few decades by text-based communication. So now you have Gen Z and below feeling uncomfortable about picking up a phone and talking to somebody, feeling uncomfortable in interviews or face-to-face sales presentations because it requires actually speaking to somebody and listening to them. It's a very different skill from text-based communication. I'm not denigrating email, instant messaging, and so on, text, SMS. It's all great stuff. It's got many advantages. It's asynchronous. It can be published, which of course has changed the world in many ways in the history of writing. And yet, would you rather read a play or hear a play being performed by an actor with all
Of
that
course, I'd
prosody?
rather hear it being performed, right,
Yeah.
and be able to connect with it in an emotional way that speaks to more than just the audible, but it speaks to the soul. So let's dive right into that, which is what the topic at hand is, which is using or communicating beyond AI. So I guess let's start with maybe the big challenge that people aren't even aware of yet, or that's coming. What's the big problem when it comes to communicating with AI, or what are some of the downfalls that can happen with this maybe becoming more dependent on AI communication?
Well, AI is very good for technical things, and it's extremely fast at gathering lots of information. So it's got some advantages that we don't have as human beings. When I can ask an AI to do something in 5 minutes, which would take me days of research. However, AI doesn't have empathy at the moment. It doesn't understand me. It can't listen to the nuances of my voice. Now, we are moving towards AI being able to speak to us. It's not far off. There's a very interesting TED talk on that subject, which I saw a few months ago. So oral computing, audio computing is coming, sound and voice as a user interface. And that's clearly going to replace a lot of text-based interface. So we will be speaking to AI and we will be listening to it. The question is, can it ever replicate human empathy, human compassion, human understanding, human intuition? When you're speaking to somebody, there's so much going on that's nonverbal in terms of you assessing and analyzing their tone and so forth, and their body language, what they actually mean, who are they, what's the context, what do you know of them? There's an enormous amount of meaning making, and actually that's my definition of sound, of listening, is making meaning from sound. So we do that all the time, and we do it in a far more profound way, I think, than AI is going to be able to do for a substantial number of years. So that is the unique human quality, which I think is going to determine success or failure for so many businesses. And you think of, financial advisors, lawyers, even doctors. There's a huge amount that AI will be able to take on, the menial tasks, the analysis, the diagnosis in many ways. So why would you want to deal with a person? Because they understand you, because you have a lifelong relationship with them. And that relationship is founded in speaking and listening, not writing, not tech, but speaking and listening. These primal skills, which, Brett, we do not teach children in school. Now, how crazy is this?
It's wild. And let me make sure I broke that, make sure I heard that correctly, right? Which is maybe perhaps what you're going to teach us here in a second, which maybe the idea of mirroring and labeling, right? Either mirroring what you've said and or labeling the emotion or the meaning behind what you said, which is so much deeper than what AI can or perhaps does do or could do, and that meaningful connection emotionally, right, between two people is what compounds the relationship, right? And that compounding of the relationship is what creates even deeper, meaningful conversations. Is that a fair summary so far, Julian?
It is, yes. I think we're going to see the envelope change in a lot of these jobs. So take financial advice, for example. A financial advisor is not going to be about just telling you the best investment. It's going to be somebody who cares about your life and helps you to be wealthy in all sorts of ways, who understands your real ambitions and desires and helps you on the journey to achieve them. Now, that will involve money, but it won't just be money. So financial advisors will become much more like life advisors. And I think that's true of all of these professions. You know, lawyers aren't going to be about doing cut and paste contracts. A machine can do that very easily. And, you know, they already are. But about really wise advice, about strategic advice, about understanding, you know, the whole landscape of the law and deciding what to do next. That kind of, it's all going to move up a level, and it'll all be based on relationship and understanding.
Okay, this is fascinating, right? And I think this is the holistic, and I think what the best naturally do, but they don't maybe realize that they're doing it, that they're not just being so one dimensional. I have a saying around here. We talk about 3-dimensional investing, which has to do with cash flow, tax flow, and debt flow, and then getting timing and meaning and purpose, and all of that surrounding that for you moving forward. And then, of course, starting with mission, vision, values for where you want to go. You know, if you don't know where you want to go or what you want to get rid of, what you want to be clear of, then it's hard to go there. And it's looking in this 3-dimensional world versus just, you know, instead of ROI, Julian, which is typically we call it return on investment, we say the true ROI is return on impact. Right? Return on impact for your family, for the causes you believe in, for the impact that you can make for society or whatever that means for you, right? And then instead of, you know, what we call passive income, we say truly passive income, meaning I don't have to trade any time or energy for the dollars that come in that can replace my living expenses and what's going to free up my time and energy to be meaningful. And then you have to look at this holistically, because this is moving into other areas versus just the numbers, just the math on the spreadsheet. It's moving towards more meaning and more impact. Any thoughts on that initial way that we're communicating that you could help me with?
Well, I think multidimensional is a very good way to caricature it, actually, to position it for people. And of course, you know, wealth, when you start to get into that word, has many dimensions. I mean, people can be enormously wealthy with almost no money. Depends on what actually matters to you, doesn't it? And we all know that money in and of itself is not the key to happiness. I mean, you're pretty unhappy if you haven't got any. But past a certain point, you know, all the research I've seen shows that happiness comes from doing service for other people and having strong relationships with other people. Those are the two prime generators of happiness in human beings. Yes, you need enough, but once you've got enough, more becomes, you know, potentially addictive and not very happy making. So there are plenty of miserable billionaires and plenty of miserable millionaires and plenty of happy people who haven't got a lot. But, you know, obviously, you know, having enough is very important. And so I think, yes, that multi-dimensional approach, Brett, is a very wise one, starting to break the thing down. It's not just about the dollar. It's about, you know, what does that mean to you? What does it take to get there? And what are your life goals? I mean, where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, even if you're younger than I am? So, yeah, I think all of those things are very important. And that, again, is where a human relationship can help to, you know, weed through the things that perhaps might appear to be important, but actually, hey, you know what, that's a passing fad, or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's actually unhealthy for you. Let's, you know, pare it down and end up with the things that really are significant in
Okay, this
making
is
you
really great. This is
wealthy.
really good. By the way, I want to dig into this a little bit here with you. Maybe we can break down some examples or some thoughts that you have on this. And by the way, if you want to learn more about Julian Treasure, go to juliantreasure.com, juliantreasure.com. So Julian, so let's let's get really practical here, right? So if somebody with communication, like what are the maybe either it's the steps or the big pillar ideas here, the big concepts of making it more meaningful by being able to listen? What would be that step there that we could maybe even role play or talk through to give people some practical hands-on training here?
Well, there's a couple of very important realizations that I teach whether I'm doing a keynote or a workshop or coaching one-to-one about listening. The first is that everybody's listening is unique. Now, that's a really important thing to understand. Most people don't have that understanding, and most people think everybody listens like I do, which means most people are going around effectively talking to themselves. That's not effective. People are all unique because we have a whole set of filters we listen through, which are about where, the culture we're born into, the language we speak, our values, attitudes, beliefs, intentions, emotions, expectations, all sorts of things. And it changes through the day for any individual or any group of people. And it's different from person to person. So there's a very important question to ask when you're speaking, to ask yourself. And that question is, what's the listening I'm speaking into? It will be different from person to person and from time to time. And becoming sensitive to that, simply asking that question will help you to sensitize to it. And that's how you hit the bullseye instead of missing the target altogether with your speaking.
Okay, this is great. I'm thinking of the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman, right? When I just literally did this with my children, my oldest 3, and I had him take a little quiz, and my wife and I took a quiz, and it ranks these 5 love languages. So would you say there's, common 5, listening, I guess, I don't know if language is the word, but it could be, or listening tones, or what would you say are some of the top ones to kind of differentiate between the language of listening?
Yeah, I talk about listening positions. So there are different places to listen from. And this is important both for the speaker and for the listener. As the speaker, you need to be asking yourself, where is that person listening from? And as a listener, you can actually move your listening position and ask yourself, am I listening from the best place in this conversation? I'll give you some examples. For business, it's very common for people to listen in a critical listening position. That is to say, judging, evaluating, weighing, is this useful? Where's the gold in this for me? And discarding anything that's irrelevant, which is very useful in business, but perhaps you wouldn't want to take that one home with you. I mean, the most brutal listening position would be kind of marking somebody out of 10 for how well they're doing this as they're speaking to you. That's kind of the extreme. So you might at home, where it's more emotional, perhaps, you're talking to your children, you might want to move into empathic listening, which is to say listening with your heart as well as your brain, and going onto the other person's island, feeling their feelings and being with them and empathizing. So there are very different listening positions. There are gender-based listening positions. I know gender's a tough territory to get into these days, but let's just put an alert on this gender stereotype. And there's lots of books about male and female communication, and there are differences. So men tend to listen in a way I call reductive, which is to achieve a point, to get to a destination, to solve a problem. There's an objective there, and it narrows down to that objective. And once that objective is achieved, on to the next thing. Women, on the other hand, not all women, not all the time, not all men, not all the time, but women tend to listen in a way I call expansive. And that is, there's no point in expansive listening. It's not trying to get to a place. It's not trying to solve a problem. It's simply being with the other person and going wherever it goes and enjoying the company. So it kind of broadens out. So, if you get these things confused, she comes home and says, darling, I had a terrible day. This happened, this happened, this happened. And he looks up from the football game and says, darling, have a bath. It always makes you feel better. So in the male world, that's problem solved, back to the football. In the female world, that was not what she was looking for. She was looking for something much more like, darling, sit down, have a glass of wine, tell me all about it. Those words that strike terror into many a male heart. Tell me all about it. So this kind of gender-based, that's the
Yeah.
origin of a lot of the complaints in relationships, which are he or she never listens to me. because we listen in different ways.
Yeah.
Particularly.
I love this. And what I'm gathering and gleaning here is position and mindset, right? And is it more going to be more emotional versus productive mindset? Like where am I? And maybe even sort of where's the other person? What are they looking for? Because you're right. In a business situation, it can be that there, you have a 30-minute or 1 hour, or how many times time you have, and they're looking for that. And then in a different situation, in a different time and place, it is more empathetic and listening and more with the heart. And in the gender base, that makes sense too. Understanding those differences. Anything else that sticks out? I mean, of course, there's the personality types. You could probably go into another layer here of how someone might be more the analytical brain versus an expressive person who talks more, or versus the productive person, the driver who wants to get the things done. Any other thoughts on the listening positions?
Yeah, there are as many as you want to invent. I mean, you can invent your own, but another very common spectrum is from distracted listening to focused listening. We do a great deal of distracted listening today because we're always multitasking. There's always something in our hand that we're looking at. Yeah, I am listening to you, tap, tap, tap. No, you're sending a text. That's different. So distracted listening is very common. There's nothing wrong with it as long as you're conscious that that's what you're doing. And really, consciousness is the secret to effective listening. Because, if somebody's telling you a joke, or, there's a bit of banter going on, distracted listening is fine. But if somebody's pouring their heart out to you about something that's really important to them, that's the time to put the device down, turn to them, look at them, and give them focused listening. Now, listeners, I wonder when the last time is that you did that. Try it after this, if you're at home. Give somebody 100% of your attention. Look at them, be with them, do nothing else. You might well get the response, "What are you doing?" Because we're not used to it. We do a huge amount of talking to somebody who's looking at something else and doing something else. Well, focused listening is a very powerful thing to do. It's a great gift to give to somebody. You don't need to do it all the time. The key is to be conscious of the listening position you're in and asking yourself, is this the most appropriate one for this conversation? And at the same time, if you're speaking, to be conscious of the listening position the other person is in. And, one of the most common complaints, questions I get, Brett, is, what if somebody's not listening to me? How do I get them to listen if they're a terrible listener? Well, two answers to that. First, show them what good listening is like. Being a good listener tends to spread the ripples of communication anywhere, in a family, in an organization, wherever it is. But number two, if somebody really is a poor listener and won't give you the attention, I'm a great believer in making agreements, having little contracts. So, Brett, I've got something really important that I'd like to talk to you about. Can you give me 10 minutes of your undivided attention, please? Not now? When would be good? Tomorrow at 10? Great. I'll see you at 10 for 10 minutes, and you're going to give me your undivided attention. And then if you start doing your email in that meeting, I think I've got a right to say, Brett, you did say undivided attention, and this is important to me. So making a contract, an agreement like that with somebody is a very good way of getting a poor listener actually to give you that precious commodity, their attention.
Oh, this is so much wisdom, Julian. I love it. I want to move into conflict, right? Because I think that's where, emotions run high, but the environment becomes unsafe. It's maybe chaotic, right? There's competing voices, and attentions and agendas and all of these different things, maybe tactics or things that aren't necessarily within the bounds of that. So how do you bring safety back to an emotional conflicting type of thing to be able to, I guess, get into a zone of actually listening again versus talking at each other?
I have a tool which I teach, and it's called PAVE, P-A-V-E, and it's specifically designed for this particular purpose. So the P of PAVE stands for paraphrase. So you listen carefully to what the other person said, and you repeat back to them what you've understood to check that the ball got over the net. Because, very often we send something and the other person receives something completely different. So it's very useful to say, so Brett, what I understood you just said is this, is that right? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know that I've heard you. And actually that defuses conflict in the first place, because being heard is a very big diffuser of upset. The A of PAVE is a difficult phase for many people. It stands for admit, as in let in. So this is based on the truth, which many people don't understand anymore, and the internet's making this much worse. The truth that two people can have very different opinions about something and both be right in their own world, with their background, with their journey, with their experience, with their perspective. So it's not about a zero-sum game. It's not I'm right, you're wrong. We can both be right. So the A is you've just said something that I fundamentally disagree with. Well, I'm going to let it in. I'm going to admit it and not make it wrong and not judge it and let it be your truth, which allows me then to move on to the V, which to me is the single biggest missing thing in the world today and is the cause of so much conflict, right up to and including war. The V stands for validate. And that sounds like this. Brett, you know what? I don't agree with you, but I can absolutely understand why you would think that. That is so different from Brett, that's wrong. Or Brett, you're an idiot. That is just going to escalate the conflict. Whereas if I say to you, Brett, I'm sorry, I completely disagree, but I totally understand why you would think that. It makes sense to me. That's validation. And we now have two different views on the table in front of us, with neither of them being right or wrong. They're just two different views. And the E is then I can empathize. So, Brett, I totally see that if that's what you believe, this experience would have been really difficult for you. Or if that's what you believe, then I understand now why you did this thing that upset me, or whatever it might be. So that's P, paraphrase, admit, validate, empathize. And it takes us to a place where perhaps we can put the two views together and create a synthesis. You know, the Greeks used to have thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. A synthesis that might be bigger and better than either of the two individual views. It certainly will allow us to move forward and create something between us.
This is magical. I am wonderful and so much wisdom. Okay, I'm going to try to break it down and see if I did a good job of listening. Okay, I wrote a bunch of notes here. So it's PAVE. Okay, it's paraphrase, admit, validate, empathize. And the first part of part P is to check. That you said the ball that went in the net, right? That basically what they said that it landed, right? So it's not agree or disagree in this stage. It's just simply mirroring maybe what they said, paraphrasing what they said, the general meaning, and this by definition will diffuse some of the emotion, right? Diffuse some of the emotion, which leads into number two. He said, admit, right? It's based on truth. Two people can have two different opinions and both be right. And I don't know if you actually say this out loud. Hey, two people can have two different opinions and both be right. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Talk about that in a minute. And you've just said something that I fundamentally disagree with, but I'm going to let it in. And the way you said it right here, I don't agree with it, but I can absolutely understand why you would think that. And that makes sense to me, right? I can totally understand if that is, if you believe that, that is why X, Y, and Z happened that actually upset me. Is that a very good summary, or what did I miss, Julian?
That's it. You got it. PAVE. And it takes us through, what could be a huge conflict and defuses it enormously. So, I think that's what we need a lot more of in the world at the moment. But unfortunately, the internet is accelerating the kind of judgmentalism. There's an addiction to being right. And the easiest way to be right, of course, is to make somebody else wrong. And you see a huge amount of that now on the internet with pylons and trolls and, internet shaming and so forth. And in the media as well. So the stories about the front page in the Times the last 2 days has been about some TV guy who upset some people by, telling rude jokes. Is that front page news in a national newspaper? But everybody loves it because they can pile on to the guy and tear him to shreds. It's like, a pack of dogs on the weakest cow in a herd or something. It's not a pleasant way to be, but it makes people feel good about themselves, because if you're wrong, I'm right, and I'm better. Now, that's so fundamentally wrong, because we can both be right, and there's no need to do it. And validation is the secret, and it's what we're lacking. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of validation going on the internet these days.
So a couple questions, right? I mentioned that on the admit part, 'cause I think that's a key transition, right?
Mhm.
So do you say that out loud? Hey, two people can have, two different opinions, but both be right. Are you actually saying that in the role play, generally speaking, or are you
No,
more so just moving straight into, yeah.
I would know it. Knowing it is the important thing. So reminding yourself of
Yeah.
that,
Okay.
say it in your head. Hey,
Mhm.
this is, my instinct is that's completely wrong. But there's a reason
Right.
why people do things. There's a reason why people say things. They have a very good reason for it in
Right.
their own world, generally. Whatever it is they've said or
Right.
done, there's always a reason for it. It wouldn't be my reason. The important thing is to understand that that's where they're coming from. That's their truth. That's their perspective.
Okay, got it. Excellent. And then now let's move past this. Now, you've gone through this, but this conflict, or let's just say the other side, is still not, wanting to connect, or still wanting to escalate, right? How do you, in a healthy way, move either past the relationship, or let's just say someone continues to bring the same thing up over and over and over again, where you've done this, you've practiced this, and then it comes again in 2 weeks or a month, and it's this kind of a cycle of it, and you're doing your best you can to be understanding and empathetic, and using PAVE. Like, what do you do there, Julian, on that scenario? What are your any wisdom for us there?
Well, if they're seriously stuck, then they need to find some help. I mean, there's a limit to
Mm-hmm.
what we can do as human beings. You can listen calmly, patiently, and compassionately, and that's possibly going to help. But people get damaged. Life often is very hard, and it
Mm-hmm.
hurts people, and they have wounds which go very deep, and they get stuck. And if that's the case, those people need help, and that's not going to come from you or me. It's going to come from a professional. Um, and in my experience in life, there's not a lot of future in going around telling people they need help. They don't take it very well. So perhaps you
Right.
need to disengage from that relationship. And that may be difficult. If it's at work, it can get very stressful. And, it can end up with leaving work because of this kind of dysfunctional environment or relationship. We've all had a boss who perhaps just shouts the whole time and doesn't give any praise and is horrible to people, or I mean, I personally suffered a great deal financially from there was a boss at the company who bought my original company, who was so ferocious that people were terrified of giving that person bad news, because they would get sacked or shouted at the very least. So they stopped giving the bad news, and they started up making up good news. And the result was that the company lived in a fantasy land. And eventually it came through to the accounts. They had to restate their accounts for 3 years because the accounts were a crock of shit, because this guy was not allowing people to tell him, bad things had happened. And so stuff was getting shoved under carpets and, locked away in cupboards. And good stuff was supposed to be happening, but it wasn't. And that wrecked their share price just at a time when I'd sold my business and was locked in onto a share deal. So I found that very upsetting. And it was a salutary lesson about the importance, if you're a leader of a team or a company, the importance of listening in a dispassionate way. You need to hear bad news as well as good news. And if you start being dictatorial in your listening and only admitting certain things, you're living in fantasy land and making life very, very difficult. And you won't know what's going on in your company, which is very damaging.
We're speaking with Julian Treasure. You can go to juliantreasure.com, juliantreasure.com. He has the book, How to Be Heard. And he is coming out with the second book we promised we would share with you. It's coming in 2025. And it's called Sound Effects. And that's going to be maybe mid-2025 to check that one out. But How to Be Heard, you can pick up now. Go to juliantreasure.com. Also, make sure you're checking out his TED Talk, again, which is the 6th top TED Talk ever given, over 150 million views. After this interview, I've never checked it out. I'm going to go check that out for sure, and the books. So Julian, I have a question for you here, maybe one other here, because you're dropping so much wisdom for us right now. How about when you as the leader have dropped the ball, right? When you have made the mistake, when it hasn't turned out how you want it to, or how maybe you had intended it to, and now you're going to the client or the friend or the family member, right? And you're apologizing for this, or you're owning this. You're walk us through maybe some wisdom there with how to properly apologize and ask for forgiveness or that reconciliation.
Well, this would lead us to my 4 foundations of powerful speaking, Brett, because that's what I would stand on in that situation. They spell the word hail, and the H stands for honesty. So I think, some people are blame throwers and don't take responsibility for anything. And if that's how you behave, you're not going to learn much. If it's never your fault, if you never make a mistake, then you won't learn much at all. Because most of us learn by making mistakes. The key thing is not to make the same mistake again. We all make mistakes. So the H, in the context of having made a mistake, is to hold your hands up and say, I made a mistake. This is what happened. Own it. And then, of course, you need to put in place, I've done this to make sure this never happens again. And if you need to make an amend or compensation, this is what I'm doing to make it up to you. So that's the H. The A stands for authenticity, and that is being yourself. So, it's a very painful process to pretend to be somebody else day after day as a leader. Many leaders are introverts. I'm an introvert. And, funnily enough, when I'm out on the circuit speaking, doing keynotes, most of the pro speakers that I meet who stand on stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people are introverts. They're not extroverts. So it's possible to be an introvert and do a really good job leading people. You can do it in a more intimate style. You can share more of yourself. You can have people really passionately committed to you without having to be table thumping and dynamic and charismatic and, dominate every room you walk into. So A, authentic, be yourself. The I is integrity, which in the context of a mistake is very important. The integrity is all about being your word. If you say it, you do it. So if you are making an amend, if you say, I'm going to do this for you, do it. There would be few bigger mistakes than compounding an error by forgetting to make the amend or the recompense, or doing it late, or whatever it may be. So integrity. And the L, perhaps surprisingly, of the 4 foundations of powerful speaking is love. That is to say, not romantic love, but wishing people well. Now, I love dealing with organizations that work on that basis, where they actually care. They care about their customers, they care about their staff, and they actually wish them well. It's not simply about making money. Money is a useful indicator of how well you're doing. It's not the objective. The objective is serving, doing a great job, creating happiness, health, growth, all sorts of good things in people's lives. If you're doing that, the money will come, definitely. If it's just about the money, then you tend to end up with one of those organizations which is unhealthy, miserable, not particularly giving good customer service. It's like the old Branson quote, look after your staff and they'll look after your customers. Looking after people, caring about people. So if you've made a mistake, care about the consequences. How was this? I'm so sorry we did this. How was it for you, Brett? What happened? How did you feel? And, just work it through and listen. And then you're in a position perhaps to make the right amend or recompense to the person. So honesty, authenticity, integrity, and love.
Wow, Julian Treasure, this has been absolutely amazing. I thank you for dropping that last piece of wisdom there. I'm so glad I asked that question. We are running out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Absolutely.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you go back to your 20-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget to make sure to tell yourself to do?
I would say it would be to create passive income for myself from a very early age. You know, compound interest is a very powerful thing. And if you start to create passive income young, then you have a very nice later life.
Excellent. Second question. What's the number one book you recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
I think that would be Indistractable by Nir Eyal. I think it's a brilliant book in an age which is all about distraction. He's hitting a nail on the head there by helping us to be focused.
Perfect. Question number 3. Number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
Well, there's actually is one from my father, who told me very, very early on. He said, "The best is the enemy of the good." And I think that's such great wisdom. Because if you're striving all the time for perfection and you're discarding all sorts of options that could get you to pretty much the same place, life becomes incredibly stressful. So, I have this conversation with my wonderful fiancée, Jane, who loves to look at all the options before buying anything. Uh, I think there's a male-female thing here as well. I'm much happier to say, yep, that'll do, and move on and use my time for something else. So we're all different, but I think in business, the best is the enemy of the good is a very wise piece of advice, because very often good, the 80-20 rule operates. Good is good enough, and then we can move on and get better and better and better. Our good becomes brilliant.
I love that. Next question. What are you most curious about right now?
Where voice is going to go in the next 5 years. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening with sound technology, with spatial audio, with generative sound, which we could talk about for hours, and with AI audio. It's going to be a very exciting next few years. Big questions, though. We'll all be speaking to a sort of Jarvis from Iron Man type thing. Who's going to own that? Will it be us, Google, Amazon, Apple? Who? And there's a lot of people fighting over that turf right now. So it'll be fascinating.
Amazing, Julian. Last question, and then we'll wrap up the show. And it's really at the heart of what we're about here at Build It to Billions podcast, also streaming on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast as well. And it's about, helping us to practice a mindset of stewardship of our ownership and compounding our wealth in our life, right, in a way that can help and bless more people. So what would you say, Julian, is the best way that you practice stewardship of our ownership? And what's something that you really are passionate about and care about deeply in this world to make a difference?
Well, I'm a huge fan of gratitude. And I teach my children all the time to focus on what they have got, not what they haven't got. And I think one of the most pernicious and addictive traits in the world today is people always thinking happiness is over there. It's never over there. It's always here. So, happiness is not that house, that income, that car, that relationship that you haven't got yet. Happiness is here today, right now. And that's always where it is. So gratitude, I think, is my answer to that question. Being in gratitude means that you're in a stronger position to give because you're happy with what you've got. And, like in the biblical story of, the woman who gave away what tiny amount she had. If you're in gratitude, you're much more able to give. Whereas if you're yearning and needing and happiness is over there, and when I get to that, then you're much more likely to close up and hang on to everything. So yeah, gratitude.
Julian Treasure, I'm grateful for you today. I want to encourage you to keep using your gifts and talents of helping the world to communicate, especially communicating beyond artificial intelligence. and doing it in a way that's meaningful, that's impactful, that changes the world. You are amazing at what you do. I'm so grateful for you being on the show. It truly was an honor. I want to encourage everybody to go to juliantreasure.com, pick up the books, How to Be Heard, and the second book, Sound Effects, coming out in 2025. But How to Be Heard is available right now. And make sure to check out Julian Treasure's TED Talk, which is going to help everybody. So thank you, Julian, for being on the show. I also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Build Billions podcast. As always, we're on a journey with you, the entrepreneur, the investor, from millions to billions, and figuring out a way to scale that. And we believe the best way to do that is to compound your wealth in your life. And it starts every single day with the mindset of practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. And again, our ultimate goal is to help you scale and build so much that you can give more or all of it away to help MVPs. I'm Brett Swartz. I appreciate everyone listening out there today. Please take action today. Please share this with someone it can be a blessing to. And we appreciate everyone out there. And we'll talk to you again real soon. Bye now.